Hello, everyone. Today we'll be talking about energy and environmental policy. The main learning objectives is for us to understand how the current infrastructure of energy use in the world is rooted in fossil fuels. So we'll briefly look at the history. We'll understand what an energy policy is and the main goals, the history of some of the important energy policies in the USA, who are the policymakers in the world. We'll also cover very important topics such as energy security, equity, and justice. What is the current US energy policy to mitigate climate change? And what is the plan for US to transition to clean energy? So this is the need of the hour. This is the objective of the whole world, to transition to clean energy. And here's a very interesting picture of how energy was used in history. So Homo erectus is discovering the value of fire. A vertical wheel was invented, windmills, electrostatic generators, steam engines, battery was invented, oil was discovered, wood was the primary fuel in the 1860s, the light bulb was discovered, electricity, steam engines, and then the hydroelectric plant in Niagara Falls in the 1895, coal for heating, gas and diesel for fuel for transportation. So all these advancements in energy use is heavily built on a infrastructure that supports fossil fuels. The machinery, the way it was created and stored and distributed, it's all using fossil fuel energy. So now comes the challenge. So when you transition to clean energy, all these technologies have to be updated. What is energy policy? It's a strategy that governments will employ to address issues in energy development, energy conversions, distribution, and use. It might include legislation, international treaties that we often see on TV, subsidies and investments to invest in clean energy, guidelines for energy conservation, taxation, and other public policy techniques. So who is creating all the energy policies in USA? At the federal level, it's the Congress and the Department of Energy, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, and the environmental protection agencies. The goals of the energy policy is to increase energy access and affordability, enhance energy security, reduce environmental and human health impacts. So you can see the overlap of the energy policy and the environmental policy. A healthy earth means a healthy human. Enhance technology for efficiency with minimal emissions. So it's like designing cars that will use less energy, clean energy, in order to go further. We would think, how does the energy policy impact the environment? See, producing and using energy more efficiently will reduce the amount of fuel that is needed. And also, it will reduce the amount of greenhouse gases and other air pollutants. So they both are intertwined. Here's a humorous kind of analogy of the different facets of a efficient policy. It's called carrots, sticks, and sermons. When you want to move a stubborn donkey, you should give it some kind of a reward. So that's the carrot. The donkey thinks it's going to give the carrot and it keeps moving. And to give it a nudge, that's the stick to push it. And then a lot of sweet talking and sermons to have it going. So this is the story of the donkey with a carrot stick and sermons. So this is actually relating to regulation, the economic means, and the information. So here, when you say stick, it's referring to the regulatory measures like laws and regulations, directives, assessments, and the carrot or the reward would be tax relief. Incentives and subsidies, they are always on the news, grants, licensing. So these are all the rewards. And the sermons refers to the strategy itself, the plan, the advertising, um, the public awareness of all the standards and the agreements. So let's look at some of the generic strategies in energy policies. It's kind of simple. You tax the dirty fuel, like a carbon tax that we studied in our last class, taxing if they are going to emit any ozone depleting chemicals. So tax the dirty and subsidize the clean. Subsidies for incentives for smart vehicles, clean electricity, and renewable energy. And a focus on federal expenditure on research and development for STEM innovation. It's technology that drives the transition. Renewable energy, advanced nuclear energy, fuel efficiency. Regulations refer to standards like efficiency standards in vehicles, appliances. We've seen appliance standards in our washing machines and refrigerator, building codes to keep the building more insulated and more energy efficient. And cap and trade, it's another strategy. Cap and trade is an approach that is used to control pollution by providing incentives for achieving reductions. So this is a strategy that was very popular with President Obama. So here we can see two scenarios. There is a cap set for the maximum amount of emissions that is allowed for a factory. Kind of is like a carbon tax kind. So if they are much below the cap, then they are rewarded. Whereas the factory that it can't go over the cap. If it has to go over the cap, it has to buy the allowance from somebody else. So one is rewarded and one is taxed monetarily. Other regulations are to integrate renewable energy into the electric grid and also reduce barriers to siting. We've seen these graphs before. So where should the focus of the energy policy be? It should be where the most damage is caused, right? So of course, the fossil fuels, like all the yellows and brown is showing the sectors that produce the most electricity here. And the objective is reduce them and increase renewables. So which sector is using the most energy? It's transportation and industry. So most of the energy policy should be addressed to reducing emissions from these two sectors. But there has been a lack of effective policies and poor enforcement drive that many industries, to pass certain laws made by Pollution Control Board that resulted in more pollution. If you look at the energy policy in USA, in the 1970s, there was this energy crisis. There was the energy supply was cut off because of a decision that President Nixon made that kind of supported Israel policies. At that time, you was importing a lot of gasoline and petroleum. That kind of even before then, there was the Clean Air Act that was implemented to reduce and control air pollution nationwide. After the energy crisis, the Department of Energy was born. So this here, the focus is to become energy efficient, energy security, and more focus on renewables. Energy Policy and Conservation Act of 1975 mandated that automobiles fuel the economy standards, and also authorized creation of strategic petroleum reserve. 1978 is the Power Plant and Industrial Fuel Use Act. That prohibited the use of natural gas in power plants. Energy Policy Act of 2005 mandated that gasoline sold in the US must have some part of renewable fuel mixed into it. Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, here a lot of money was allotted for clean energy, the smart grid development, low income home weatherization projects, green federal buildings. So it's like lead by example, renewable energy, energy efficiency, green job training, and grants for creating efficient energy storage devices. So a thing to understand here is we can reduce carbon emissions by reducing fossil fuels and increasing energy efficiency. So energy efficiency can cut the energy use of greenhouse gases in half by 2050. So our focus should also be there. Policies should be there also. So here is an allocation of energy savings by policy. Again, you can see most of this pie chart is taken by transportation and industries. And then, of course, appliance standards, building codes, they are all included in like smaller pieces of the pie. What is an energy system? So here's a picture of an energy system. So this is the framework that will make the energy, store the energy, supply the energy to consumers. So it's talking about all the components of production of energy, conversion and delivery and use of energy to the end users. So here, this is also an electric grid that we are familiar with. So an electric grid is a network of synchronized power providers and consumers that are connected by transmission lines. So here are the consumers that are creating the demand, and the electric grid, now it is mainly powered by fossil fuels. And this is the transition that we are looking for. So the energy grid of the future will be powered by renewable energy and more efficient energy. And also energy efficiency, less energy use and efficiency at the consumer level. These are three terms that you would commonly come across when we talk about energy. What does energy security mean? Security is nothing but a reliable supply of energy and access to energy in the quantity and quality that you need at an affordable price. Energy equity indicates the distribution of cost and benefits of the energy system. What has happened is poor communities have been historically marginalized with a lack of access to energy efficient housing and transportation. So we see a huge inequity there. Energy justice also is talking about how low income people suffer the highest energy burdens with power shutoffs and service breakdowns. So here's the world population. So this is an old map. So you can see the billions of people, and the people in gray do not have access to electricity. More than 1 billion people do not have access to electricity, and nearly 3 billion people do not have energy to even for cooking. So we are talking about the very poor and developing countries. And here you can see a mom cooking over a fire, and the whole room is full of smoke. There's no ventilation. So it's exposing them to toxic air pollution. So this is United Nations data. So this inequality of energy is further shown in this graph. Uh, Here's the carbon dioxide emission that is driving climate change in the world. So who's putting out the most carbon dioxide? It's China, USA, European Union, the top three, and and India, and the rest of the world is here. And but if you see per capita carbon dioxide emissions, it's USA. So this is showing that since 2000, rising carbon dioxide demands, emissions in China and the rest of the world has surpassed the output of United States and Europe. So USA and Europe is putting out more carbon emissions. So we need international energy organizations um, to solve this problem. IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's a part of the United Nations for assessing the science related to climate change and climate action. Department of Energy policies is makes policies regarding to energy security, safety, and accessibility. EIA, Energy Information Administration, they collect, analyze data, and disseminate energy information to promote strong policy making. This is a part of the Department of Energy. Environmental policies are mainly made by environmental protection agencies. Here's a success story of an environmental policy. So here there is Montreal Protocol in 1987. So the scientists discovered that the ozone hole above the Arctic was becoming larger and larger. So if the ozone layer of the stratosphere becomes larger, we will be exposed to more UV radiation that is responsible for causing skin cancer, cataract in the eye, and also some immune disorders. So many countries of the world came together and they agreed that they will stop using nearly 100 chemicals that were identified to cause this ozone depletion. Carbofluorocarbons, hydrochlorofluorocarbons, and many more. So because of that protocol, we can see improvement here. So here you can see by 2021, most of the emissions are below the line. So now we are seeing that the ozone layer, the hole is recovering. It's becoming it's becoming smaller. So policies do work. Here's the Kyoto Protocol of 1997. It was an international treaty that set binding targets for the industrial countries and the European community for reducing greenhouse gases. So these are the 7 greenhouse gases that was discovered. Was discussed: carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, sulfur hexafluoride, and nitrogen trifluoride. So the thing is, there's mixed results from this treaty because there's both winners and losers. The main deficiency was in the structure of the agreement because the developing countries were excluded from this treaty. So in this graph, you can see there are many countries that kept to their promise and did reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. So you can see them in blue here. However, the developing countries at the time who were not included in the treaty started to produce a lot of carbon emissions. See this, China here. So mixed results here. This is a very important picture for sustainability students. So in 2015, the United Nations set forth the Sustainable Development Goals. You can see, the whole world must come together to address poverty and hunger and health and education. These are basic human rights. And number 7 is affordable energy and clean energy. So goal number 7 is to ensure universal access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy services, increase sustainability of renewable energy, and also increase energy efficiency. So you can see 7A, facilitate access to clean energy research, expand supply of sustainable energy, ensure universal access to energy services, increase share of renewable energy, double improvement of energy efficiency. And here's another interesting picture of the challenges and possible solution. So here you can see, because of rapid population growth and unplanned urbanization, there is a huge pressure on the environment. Our water is polluted, our air is polluted, our soil is polluted, people are sick, and then it seems to be a common trend now. The solution is sound urban planning, sustainable buildings, low carbon transport, green spaces for people and children to play, and a sustainable, um, less consumerism lifestyle. Another problem, our cities account for 80% of the energy consumption and 75% of the global waste. That plastic garbage patch in the oceans come to mind here. This is a society of over consumerism. So here the solution would be to invest in renewable energy, waste management, recycling, a green infrastructure. Here is like a disaster that happened, because of climate change. I remember in Springfield, like maybe like 10 many years ago, there was this very bad hurricane, but the city was not prepared for it. That means it was not resilient. Because of a high concentration of people, infrastructure, high housing, and economic activities, cities are very vulnerable to climate change and natural disasters. So our focus should be on creating a resilient, it has to be more resilient to climate related disasters. So we have to protect our cities, because it is the center for social, cultural, and economic activity. Here is the very famous Paris Accord or Paris Agreement of 2015. Here you can see a picture of all the world leaders, and it was President Obama here. We can see him. So this is an international treaty on climate change. So how many countries? 197 countries. They all come together and they pledge to mitigate climate change. The countries pledge to keep the rise in the mean global temperature to only 1.5 degrees by 2050. Emissions must be reduced as soon as possible and a net zero by the middle of 21st century. So in order to reduce the global warming, in order to avoid it, emissions have to be cut by 50% by 2030. So this is a very tall order, and this is very serious. And then we also know how the next president pulled out of the Paris Accord, and President Biden is back in. That is not good. But it's good that we are in. And this picture is showing some of the effectiveness of energy policies. So here we are talking about zero carbon emission and fuel efficiency standards that was pushed by President Obama. And then you can see how the vehicle standard, see here is the historical performance, and the dotted line is the targets. So here we can see that the vehicle standard in USA, it went from 35.5 miles per gallon to 50 miles per gallon. And then also focus and R&D on creating vehicles that are more lightweight, because heavy cars will use more gasoline. The aerodynamics of the car to have better energy efficient tires and heat resistant paint. That there's paint that can like repel heat, so you don't have to turn on your AC too often. So these are some suggestions and some success stories that we are heading towards. And this has been around for a long time now. This is the energy efficient buildings and all the subsidies and incentives that the government provides. There's free audits. They come check your home to see if it's insulated properly, and they even give you free bulbs, and to reduce the energy use in a house. And this is interesting. The low E glass is like kind of an insulated glass that will allow light in, but it will keep your house warm in the winter and cool in the summer. And it also like reduces UV radiation. So it's like a smart glass. Efficient lighting using LED bulbs, double insulation, energy management that optimizes energy use. If you're not using a room or like the basement, it can turn off. You can turn it off. Photovoltaic panels for solar energy, low pressure water faucets to reduce our water use. Here is a picture that shows how efficient LED bulbs are. See, when they were very popular in 2010, they were very expensive, but now you can buy it for like a couple of dollars. So here, so you can see how the price has steeply dropped, making it more affordable, and the efficiency of the bulb has tremendously increased. So this is a very good transition that we are already following. Energy efficient appliances. So here's a picture of just a refrigerator. They used to cost a lot more, and they cost a lot of pollution. So they can produce the same amount of service with less pollution and greater servings to the consumer in the form of energy use and cost. So you can see the price of refrigerators has tremendously dropped, but the size has increased, but they are more fuel efficient now. Fuel efficient. So President Biden, what are some of his policy goals? So the main goal for this presidency is to transition to clean energy. So it's called as the clean energy revolution. So it all started by rejoining the Paris Agreement and pledged to decrease the greenhouse gas emission by setting limits on the methane emission, providing tax incentives for carbon capture, utilization and technology, CCUS for short. The objective is to become carbon free by 2035. Heavy investment in research and development that will encourage the development of clean technologies, building a modern and sustainable infrastructure to ensure that buildings, water, transport, and energy infrastructure can withstand the impact of climate change. So this is the resiliency. Making large investment in energy efficiency for buildings, creating new energy efficiency standards for electronic equipment and devices, promoting commitment to zero emission mobility, focus on development of smart vehicles. So all this with a boom in more jobs in the clean energy field. So we've talked about the history of energy policy in the world and in USA. We saw how it overlaps with environmental policy and the current policy set forth by Joe Biden. And I hope that was helpful.